Greetings everyone. Welcome to another session of Feminist Speaks. My name is Analyst, and I am part of the Pan Africanism Today Secretariat. And today we are having a conversation with one of our dear friends and comrade Kambale Musavuli. Today, we're talking about Andrée Blouin, who was a political activist, human rights advocate, and a writer. Our guest who's going to be speaking to us about Andrée Blouin is Comrade Kambale Musavuli, who is a native of the Democratic Republic of Congo, is a leading human rights advocate and an analyst with the Center for Research on the Congo Kinshasa. For over a decade, he served as the spokesperson for the Friends of the Congo. Musavuli lectures on conflict minerals, peace and security, advocacy, grassroots mobilizing, social movements, the role of the youth in Africa, corporate social responsibility, gender-based violence, and its connection to resource exploitation and poverty. He firmly believes that through Pan-Africanism based on scientific socialism, Congolese and Africans have a chance to regain control of their land and destiny. Welcome, Comrade Kambale. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to Feminist Speaks.
Thank you, Comrade, and thank you for that scary bio. I'm very happy to be with you, and I hope we'll be able to share and learn from one another.
Wonderful, comrade. So today we're admiring the contributions of Andrée Blouin to the struggles of emancipation, struggles of liberation in Africa. Could you tell us more about who she is and what kind of contribution she made to the struggle for liberation in Africa?
Andrée Blouin is an internationalist. Andrée Blouin is a woman who was born in Central African Republic. I came to know who she is through learnings with Congolese elders. I think the first elder who spoke to me about her was Dr. George Zongola Talaja. He wrote the book From Leopold to Kabila, A People's History. And he referred to her as the secretary of Lumumba. Those were, I think it was about a decade ago, in a meeting in his home in North Carolina. And as you know, as a young person, I was asking questions about the liberation struggle of the Congo, and her name came up. So as he mentioned her, I was surprised. Oh, Lumumba had a Central African woman as a secretary. I was curious to know who she was, but I did not research much. A few years later, when connected with Wamba Diawamba, a Congolese scholar, intellectual, Marxist intellectual, passed away a few years ago. He also spoke to me about her. He actually was a friend of Andrée Blouin. So anytime he went to Paris before she died in '86, he met her. So he shared more about who she was, but it was still in the context of administrative work. But the person who helped me understand really who she was Herbert Weiss. He was a young person in the 50s actually. That's when he arrived in the Congo and studied the social movement in DRC, specifically Parti Solidaire Africain of Gizenga, and also MNC of Patrice Lumumba. So while I was at his home, I saw a book, an autobiography of a woman, and he said Andrée Blouin. So I asked him, "You knew Andrée Blouin?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Can you share with me more about her?" And he looked at me and said, "But how can you work on the Congo and you are asking me to talk about Andrée Blouin? You're supposed to know who she is." So he spent a few hours where we were discussing and sharing, and I was very surprised to know her contribution. And I was very curious to know what was in that book. It became as this surprise book that I've never read that I'm supposed to read because I do a lot of work on the Congo. And as I started reading the book, I was amazed about her history. So who is she? Based on autobiography, based on information that I've heard over the years, and also interaction I've had with her daughter, Blouin. She is someone who was born in the Central African Republic under the colonial era. The French controlled Central African Republic. Her father was French. Her mother was Central African. And as she was born of a mixed couple, at the time, many people who were born in that context were put into an orphanage. So at a very young age, she was taken away from her parents and sent in an orphanage, not even in Central African Republic, but in Congo, Brazzaville. So if you even look at the map of the African continent, and you see where the Central African Republic is, and you see where Congo, Brazzaville is, it's almost as taking a child born in South Africa and moving them to Zimbabwe, while their parents are still in South Africa, right? So they literally moved her in another country, and she lived in the orphanage. And her experience in the orphanage created some form of consciousness around colonial exploitation, right? The first experience that she had with colonial exploitation was how she was literally kidnapped or removed from her parents to be moved into another place where she also was mistreated in the orphanage. Years later, when she was a teenager, she was able to escape the orphanage and cross the river of the Congo River to Congo Kinshasa, which was under Belgian rule. So Congo Brazzaville into French rule, Congo Kinshasa into Belgian rule. As she was in Congo, she pretty much now engaged more into the colonial struggle. She got married. And then as she got married, she had a child, and her child died of malaria. And the reason why her child died of malaria was that at that time, it was almost illegal to provide medicine. At the time, it was quinine, the plant that was transformed into a pill that was used to treat malaria. Hospitals could not provide the medication to Black people, and her child was considered Black. So because her child did not receive treatment, her child died. So this was the second experience that made her be much more engaged to stop the exploitation, the colonial exploitation at the time. She became very engaged in the movement to provide medical support to indigenous Africans. And through that, she connected with many, I would say, Pan-African fighters at that time, not just in the Congo, but in the region, given that she spoke French. And she also spoke the local language in Central Africa, particularly in the western part of Congo, the Kikongo. She was very fluent in the language. That allowed her to move from communities to communities. She connected with Sékou Touré, who was campaigning at the time in the late 50s for RDA to come into power in Guinea. And she was an aide to Sékou Touré. And through the work that she did with Sékou Touré, she connected also with Kwame Nkrumah, as there was a network of Pan-Africanists who were working at the time. So her support in Guinea was to make sure that the political party of Sékou Touré was able to gain power. And as they were controlling the country, she also helped as an advisor to the presidency. So now we are now around 1959, 1960. Congolese have connected to the larger Pan-African movement, specifically in 1958 with 3 Congolese that came to Accra. We are talking about Patrice Lumumba, Joseph Ngalula, and Gaston Diomi. Those were the 3 Congolese who took part at the All-African People's Conference in 1958. So some of the resolution and the work that took place in 1958 was that for those who already gained independence and those who were still fighting needed to collaborate to make sure that more African countries are independent. And Congo was really central to the discussions of 1958, because Congo was seen as a large country, second largest African country by size. Now it had so much potential. Kwame Nkrumah in his book Challenge of the Congo even speak about that, where already in the 50s, we knew that the Congo River could provide electricity to the entire African continent. So in the plan of the United States of Africa, Kwame Nkrumah saw that Congo will be essential. If Congo is free, its wealth and its people will be the engine for the transformation of Africa. So as this movement is moving forward and more Africans are supporting movement from I would say an international perspective, a Pan-African perspective, a woman from Central African Republic living in Guinea, working with the Guineans. Something was happening also in Ghana, where you had Padmore from the Caribbeans, W.E.B. Du Bois from the United States, and many others who helped the Ghanaian administration. There was a international network of people of color, of Blacks, who wanted to see the end of colonialism on the African continent. So in 1960, there was a Pan-African political party in Congo. The party was called Parti Solidaire Africain, which means an African Solidarity Party in English. And this party was led by Gizenga, who was a non-Marxist at the time, who understood that for Congo to be free, it did not need to engage in a nationalist agenda, but in a Pan-African agenda. And it looked for movements also across the Congo that had the same Pan-African vision. And one of these parties was Patrice Lumumba's party, Mouvement National Congolais, the National Congolese Movement. And Patrice Lumumba's party created a coalition with PSA of Gizenga. So as Gizenga was making an outreach to the Pan-African network, they sent delegates to Guinea. While these delegates were in Guinea, while they were in a bar in the city, they were talking among themselves in local language, Kikongo. Then there was a woman who just came to the table, started speaking to them in Kikongo. And these Congolese were confused. I said, why is there someone who speaks our local language in Guinea? Who are you? So she introduced herself. My name is Andrée Blouin. I'm here helping with the movement, the Pan-African movement here in Guinea. But she did not share a connection with Sékou Touré because she didn't know who they were. But these Congolese who came to Guinea that evening were meeting Sékou Touré. As they went to meet Sékou Touré in the evening, Andrée Blouin was summoned to the palace. She was introduced to the Congolese delegation, and she was given a mission. Her mission was to go to the Congo, given technical skills, organizing skills, which she already demonstrated in Guinea by helping in bringing Sékou Touré to power, that she will be essential in supporting the Congolese who were organizing in the Congo. She did not argue about this leadership direction, right? They said that you have a mission to go do in the Congo. As a militant, she said, I will go. And she arrived in the Congo in February of 1960. It was a very important period to arrive in the Congo in 1960 because in January, there were already massive protests in the Congo where Congolese were demanding independence. About 200 Congolese on January 4th, 1959, the year previous year, were killed for demanding that. So there were already a national movement for independence. And after the roundtables, after the discussion with the Belgians, it became clear that it was inevitable for the Congo to become independent. So Congo was going into an electoral period in May 1960. And she was essential in helping the alliance of Patrice Lumumba, MNC, and Gizenga's PSA to win the election of May 1960. Single-handedly, she was able to mobilize 45,000 Congolese women to sign into a political project to support MNC in the election. Up until today, I have yet heard any Congolese woman or a Congolese man mobilized single-handedly 45,000 Congolese women to sign into a political program. That's the emphasis I wanted to share about who she was, a stellar organizer, an internationalist, a Pan Africanist. And she shares that also in her book, that she did not have a national tie. She didn't see herself as a Central African woman or a Guinean or a Congolese. She saw herself as an African woman fighting for the liberation of African people. And she concretely engaged in the liberation struggle of African leaders of the time.
Thank you so much, Comrade Kambale, for that very detailed tracking of the life, the contributions that she has made to African liberation, being stationed in Guinea and going back into the Congo to contribute towards the building of a free and independent Congo. And if briefly you could, touch up, as you've touched on, that at the time when she was in Congo, Congo was under the colonial bondage under Belgium. Could you again speak more on what the conditions were at this time in the Congo, and how she also contributed, as you have mentioned, also contributed to the development of an independent Congo?
The struggle for liberation of the Congo is a long one, but I will start with 1885. In 1885, European nation with the United States signed the document called the Act of Berlin. And the Act of Berlin carved the African continent and effectively carved the African continent. As you read the Act of Berlin, which I encourage anyone to do, the document is public today, we can read it. You will notice that in the Act of Berlin, they speak about two countries. They speak about the Congo and the, Niger. And when the context of the Congo is that all European nations want a control of this land. In order for them not to fight among each other for the control of this land, they gave it to one person. They gave it to King Leopold II, the King of Belgium. And he controlled the Congo as a personal property. Literally, that was a real estate that he owned, which he never visited. But anything that happened on the land pretty much belonged to him in terms of the extraction of mineral resources. But in the carving up of the Congo, what they created is what they called Congo Free State. Not because the people on the land was free, but because the export of Congo's resources on the land was not taxed. Any European power, including the United States, any of these powers that decided to exploit Congo's resources could extract it for free, as long as King Leopold controlled that land. People resisted, and as they resisted in 1908, Congo was taken away from King Leopold, but it was not given back to the Congolese, it was given to the Belgians. So the Belgians portray in the world that what they were bringing in the Congo is civilization. But that's not what took place. Now, you have people like Simon Kimbangu, who fought for a free Congo. He actually spent more years in jail than Mandela. He was in prison for close to 30 years. He died actually in prison. But what was Simon Kimbangu fighting for? He was fighting for a free and liberated Congo. You had Lupungu II, who was in the Kasai region, who also resisted the Belgians. But what did they have to resist? The Congolese were living under slavery in their own land. You literally had foreign powers who had a stronger military power, subjugating the Congolese to inhumane conditions and demanding that the resources of the land must go to Europe. So Congo's copper was essential for World War I, especially for the reconstruction of Europe. For World War II, Congo's uranium was taken to bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This was not a desire of the Congolese, but the Belgians, who controlled the land, took the uranium, sold it to the so-called Manhattan Project run by Albert Einstein in New York City, moved the uranium to Oakland, and then from there, they moved the uranium bombs or the plutonium bombs to ship to Hiroshima and Nagasaki and bombed Japan. That was under Belgian rule. So Congo was always seen as a place where they could get their resources, and they made Congolese work on the soil to exploit these resources. But then there was a movement of Congolese who continued to resist, from Simon Kimbangu to Lupungu to Patrice Lumumba, who was born in the Kasai region as well, understood that in order to mobilize the Congolese, we need to unite them for the question of the land, why the land is important, the control of the land was important, and also to connect Congolese from all walks of life in a political agenda. And that's something that was very important for MNC of Patrice Lumumba, that while he was born in the center of the Congo, his political base was in the northeast part of Congo, in the Kisangani region, the Ituri region. That was where his base was. But then in his mobilization effort and in connecting with others who were mobilizing at the time, he was exposed to a larger discussion that this was not just a problem in the Congo. He discovered going in 1958 that there were other, going in 1958 in Ghana, that there were other Africans also fighting for liberation, be it in Kenya, be it in Rhodesia, be it in the countries around Ghana, that people around Africa all had the same common enemy. And a common enemy at the time in the 50s was colonialism. So the anti-colonial struggle needed to be united. So him coming to Ghana and going back to the DRC, he understood that he needed to connect our struggle in the Congo with the larger struggle on the African continent. But in order for that to be achieved, he could not do that alone. This is why in the Congo, you had the Mau Mau. People do not know that. So while I'm speaking about Andrée Blouin's engagement in the Congo in 1960, around April and May 1960, you also had Kenyans who had a film called Liberté, which means freedom, that they were screening in different villages in the Congo, showing the people the importance of fighting for independence. You had Cameroonians who were there. You had Chadians who were there. You actually even had Serge Michel from Algeria, who was an advisor to Patrice Lumumba, right? That you had all these Africans working with Patrice Lumumba, being very clear ideologically that the liberation of the Congo was essential, that it needed a Pan-African agenda, a concrete Pan-African agenda. And that's the context in which even Andrée Blouin engaged, and they were successful. A work of mobilizing 45,000 women to join the political party was critical for the election of May 1960. The alliance of Patrice Lumumba's MNC with PSA of Gizenga won the election of May 1960. This is what lifted up Patrice Lumumba to become our first democratically elected prime minister. And as he became prime minister, the role that Andrée Blouin played was that she became the chief of protocol. And it's very important to not speak about that aspect of her work, because as I said, I was introduced to her as the secretary of Patrice Lumumba. She was more than a secretary, right? On June 30th, 1960, most of us know that Patrice Lumumba made a prophetic speech, a very important speech about the struggle of the Congolese people. And that speech was written by Andrée Blouin. How do we know that? The Lumumba Commission that was created in Belgium around 2002 to look into the assassination of Patrice Lumumba had different people at the time actually share information that existed. One of the people who spoke was Nendaka, and in the commission, it clearly explained what happened that day, of the day before June 30th. Lumumba asked 3 of his advisors to write speeches that, a speech that he will read. Andrée Blouin submitted one, and others submitted. As he read the 3 speeches, he picked up the one that Andrée Blouin wrote, and made a few additions and corrections, and that's actually what he read at Independence Day. So as we hear that speech where Patrice Lumumba say, combattant de l'indépendance, aujourd'hui victorieux, je vous salue. Fighters, combatants for independence, today victorious, I salute you. That statement came from a woman, from a Pan-African woman, from an internationalist woman who understood that at that moment of Congo's independence, it was important to remind the world of the history of our struggle, that it wasn't just young Congolese with their own minds that day who decided to fight and become independent. That she reminded Andrée Blouin in that speech that it was through blood, sweat, and tears that we gain independence. It's not because the Belgians, in their own goodwill, decided for us to to have independence that now we have to greet the King of Belgium, right? It was Le Roi Baudouin, King Baudouin at the time, that thank you for giving us independence. That wasn't the context. So she made sure to remind the people the struggle the Congolese people had to go through to gain independence, and emphasize that through solidarity of the oppressed people of the world, Congo will continue to be free. And that speech came from Andrée Blouin. It's very, very important because people always speak about Patrice Lumumba, say he made that fiery speech, but that speech was written by an African woman, a Pan-Africanist and an internationalist, who made sure to lend her skills and know-how, privilege, what she could provide to the struggle. She made sure that it was available to liberation movements out of that time on the African continent.
Thank you, Comrade Kambale, again. And I just truly appreciate how you put it, that in when she was writing that speech, she reminded the people of the sacrifices that they had to make and the resistance that they had to put up in order for them to have victory and have the independence that they were so longing for the so many years of brutalization, of losing dignity, displacements, and so many things that happened under the colonial project of the Belgians. And as you speak of that remembrance, I think at this time I'd like to just ask about the legacies that exist in the memory of Andrée Blouin, such a huge giant who contributed a lot to Pan-Africanism, contributed a lot as an internationalist to the liberation of those who are oppressed. If you can speak to us about what are some of those legacies that exist now today in memory of her.
It's been very difficult to even have information about her. And, I'm a guilty one. I actually had a book the entire time I was seeking information about Andrée Blouin at home. It's the book Gender Decolonization, The Legacy of Patrice Lumumba. It was written by Karen Bohr. She's a professor at University of San Francisco, a great friend. And she wrote the book, but I relied more on having conversations with her than finishing the book. And after I started getting more information about her, I was surprised that she actually had one chapter in the book about Andrée Blouin, which I had never read, but I had the book. I read different sections about Léonie Abo, but I never read the full book. That I didn't have the discipline to seek further, that I was hoping that the information would come to me. But through time, her name kept coming up. But her name came up through people who knew her personally, who included her, of course, in their books. But it was this discussion in the intellectual circle that took place, but not in the discussion of the people themselves. So I could say 5 years ago, it was virtually impossible to find information online about Andrée Blouin. Today you can, you type and you see some few articles now that's been published. But 5 years ago, you couldn't find any. Why did this happen? Beyond me saying that I'm taking responsibility as well, accountability, that I did not seek further to learn more about her. You know, it was just something I knew, hey, it's the secretary of Lumumba, as who was taught by one of the Congolese elders. But I do believe that there was a concerted effort to make sure not just her name, right, but the struggle of independence is erased from the collective memory of Africans. Why am I saying this? Young Africans in a very brutal time were able to connect when there was no Facebook, when there was no Twitter, when means of communication was very difficult, were able to connect in a very meaningful way in 1945 in Manchester at the 5th Pan-African Congress. And at the Congress, they decided that our urgent, immediate action is to make sure that African countries are liberated from colonialism and to work toward a Pan-African Union under the umbrella of socialism. So this was a resolution that they put in 1945 in Manchester, but they actually also put that in practice. Because 15 years after the resolution of 1945, Congo became independent. A direct effect, directly connected to the work of the young people in Manchester. The young people who were in Manchester, who did they become? Kwame Nkrumah and Padmo, who were at the secretariat of that conference, led a movement, the Student Council of the West African Student Council, that mobilized across West Africa, that brought about independence movement, and actually also brought to prominence Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, who later became the head of state of Ghana, is directly connected to that conference. So if today we start knowing how did they do it, how across the continent they knew that it did not matter if in Ghana today we are saying fix the country and Ghana become free, that will not have any impact on the African continent. It doesn't matter if the Congolese on the ground are mobilizing and saying, Telema, we're going to rise up and transform the Congo, and we are free in Congo. That will not also transform the continent. We must make sure that we connect, because the forefathers of independence saw that the agenda was continental, that as one country becomes free, we must connect with the others. And then to understand the impact that Andrée Blouin had in the independence of Guinea, in the independence of Congo. A woman was able to move from countries to countries, speak local languages in these countries, going into the villages like in Kenge, inside of the DRC, speaking to the people in Kikongo and saying, we must be independent. And for us today to look at ourselves and say, wait, if she could do that, when it was very difficult to fly from one country to another. Like today, I can send someone a message on Twitter in what they call DM. I can DM them on Twitter and Instagram, a young African in Nigeria or in Senegal, in other places. Instantly, they get the message. Back then, they couldn't DM anyone, but they were able to achieve independence. So the erasure, right? The fact that they erased their work in the consciousness of Africans is actually intentional. Because another thing too, if you go to the archives of the United States, specifically the State Department Foreign Relations archives of the time, you actually type just Andrée Blouin, or you just type Blouin, you'll see what the CIA, the State Department, had on her. They fear this woman. Why did they fear her? It's not like, I don't know how to explain it. It's very interesting to see even how they spoke about Blouin, about Serge Michel, that we may lose the Congo to communists. These are statements from the U.S. archives, right? And as you look at these statements, you start asking yourself, why were Africans fighting for independence? And if they are fighting for independence, for human dignity, why do we need to have labels about what we are fighting about? Because we can only say what we're fighting. At the time they said, it does not make sense that a country called Belgium controls the Congo as a colonial entity. Will the US be okay with them being a colonial entity? No, what did they say? We're gonna throw the tea in Boston, right? That's what they said they did. They just celebrated the so-called independence where they still had slaves, right? But in a general sense, is they fought for their own independence. But why we on the African continent must be not independent? So Africans said, in order for us to have roads, hospitals, universities, schools, better education, better infrastructure, we need capital. What type of capital? Capital that come from the exploitation of our own resources. We want to get our gold, exploit this gold, take the profit out of the gold, and build the infrastructure of the country. We want to take our cobalt, do the same. We want to take our diamond, do the same. But we can't do that. We cannot do that now because these resources don't belong to us, but it's on our land. And these resources belong to Belgium. So we must fight to regain control of our land and resources if we want to make sure that children of the Blouin of the future do not die of malaria. That we have roads that connect Congo to every country around the region. That we can have better education because we need that money, but that money is not going to be given to us by them. We have to work for it, right? So we are willing to work on our land, process the resources from our land, take out that profit, and build what we need in our country. That's what we say we will do, and they label it communism. So whatever you're going to label it, we have the right to fight for our land, to fight for human dignity, to fight for freedom. And if to fight for freedom, to fight for human dignity, to fight for the benefit, all right, the betterment of humanity, if that's called communism, that's what we have to do. Because without human dignity, there can be liberty. A direct quote from Patrice Lumumba in his last letter to Pauline, his wife, right? And he clearly said that we know that human dignity cannot come from if you are not free. And if you are not free, there can be justice. So we must fight for that. And they were so afraid of it that they put her name in CIA archives, in State Department archives, that all she wanted was a free and liberated Congo and free and liberated Africa, where any African can live in human dignity and free from any form of oppression. But they made sure that we did not know that struggle, so that as we are fighting today, we don't have a blueprint of how it can be done, right? We assume that we are starting the struggle from zero. No, there are already things that's been done. We have now political independence. We still do not have economic independence. So we need to continue the struggle for freedom where it stopped to now, so that we gain economic independence. So this is why they've erased her struggle and the struggle of the forefathers of independence, so that we do not know that we actually have a compass that tells us the direction in which we have to take to transform the African continent.
Thank you again, Comrade Kambale, for that powerful intervention, urging us to continue to fight and not fight in silos, because it is through the concerted efforts in unity that allowed us to have victory over colonialism. And it's going to be that unity, that Pan-African spirit, that is going to allow us to build a better Africa, because we share a common history, we share a common present as Africans, and we also share a common destiny. And it's going to take our concerted efforts to build a prosperous and successful Africa, whereby children do not die of malaria, do not die in wars and in conflicts in the many regions that we are finding conflict now today. That the best way to commemorate these giants in Africa is through intentionally going back and to remember them, to fight against the erasure of their contributions, of their lives, and the important role that they played in the liberation of Africans from colonial domination. And with that, you had mentioned also earlier that you had come across a lot of books reading about her. And I wanted to find out is there any part in the books that you've read, in her books, that you would like to quote, something that should agitate us as Africans who are in struggle to continue to fight, to continue to push back against the erasure of our history, of the brutalities of the past, of our culture of resistance?
Yes, I mean, I will give a quote, but I also want to give an analysis, because there is a book by Larry Devlin. He's a former CIA agent. He was the chief of station of the CIA based in Congo. And when you read what he wrote in his book, it's quite disgusting. It seems to have been infatuated by who she was and the power that she had around the circle, that he doesn't allow you to see who she truly is. So one has to be able to analyze more about who she was. And this is a comment that I received from her daughter, because her daughter was in the Congo when she was kicked out of the DRC with the influence of the CIA, of course, but the Mobutu powers. You know, after they arrested Lumumba, they put him in house arrest. His advisors were literally hunted. You know, Andrée Blouin was jailed. Her husband was jailed. And the children also were actually kept away from the parents. So it took great effort of all the Pan-Africanists who were in Kinshasa to be able to help them flee the Congo, since she was being targeted at the time. What she always emphasized with me is, whenever Andrée Blouin is discussed, sometimes is this fascination of a mixed race. And she said her mother never saw herself as a mixed race. She was born as an African. And she saw even how, being born of an African mother, her own child was not seen as a European. Her own child was seen as an African child. Her child died of malaria because they couldn't give her child medicine for malaria. And she gave her life to the liberation of Africa. And at great peril, you know, and she was forced to be in exile after the DRC affairs, because the CIA was really intentional to kill and destroy anyone who worked with Patrice Lumumba. So that's one thing that she's always emphasizing, is it's important to know the contribution that she had for the liberation of the African continent as an African woman, as a Pan-Africanist, and as an internationalist. That is an important element. But the quote that I would love, I always present, is the quote from her biography, her autobiography. And it's toward the end of the book. I think it's the last paragraph of the book, where she speaks about Africa. You know, sometimes we get offended when Africa is referred to as a country, right? No, Africa is not a country; it's a continent. But she framed it in a very beautiful way about how we have to think about Africa. as one block, as a, as she's presenting as a country, because if it's our country, we will all fight for the continent, not for our national boundaries, but for the entire African continent. So what she says is, I want Africa to be loved. I speak of my country, Africa, because I want her to be known. We cannot love what we do not know. Knowing comes first, the love follows. Where there is knowledge, surely there will be love. And it's so powerful, that quote, right? Say that, how can you love something you do not know? Why would you care about what's happening to the migrants, African migrants who have just been killed? Over 30 of them have been killed in Morocco. But if you are as outraged about the killing of migrants by the Moroccan forces, you should also be as outraged with the colonization of Western Sahara by Morocco. Same is true with the French military bases, the US military bases on the African continent. But do we have the information? Do we have the knowledge of what is happening on the African continent? So it's upon us, the African people, the African youth, the Pan Africanists, the fighters on the African continent who want to see a free and liberated Africa, to start studying what are the struggles happening on the African continent. As we become aware of the struggles, connect it to our struggles locally. That's how we will love our continent. That's how we will love our people on the African continent. And when we love our people, then we can fight for liberation. And that's the most powerful quote from our autobiography that was written a few years back. There is another one coming up soon. I mean, whenever it will be published, it's being co-authored by her daughter, because she feels that there need to be more information about what she did. And she gave us this gem in reminding us that we can't say we love Africa if we have knowledge of what Africa is actually today.
Thank you so much, Kambale. That is a powerful quote. You cannot love something that you do not know. We cannot love African people if we do not know and understand the conditions that they are in, the struggles that they are fighting. That's the only way we can reach to love. Where there is knowledge, there surely will be love. Such a powerful quote. And at this time, as we land now, I would like to ask about the importance of inclusive feminism, speaking about today a feminist figure who contributed so immensely and had such a huge contribution to the project to build a liberated Africa, a well-united Africa. What is the importance of inclusive feminism in the struggle to truly free Africa from the neo-colonial bondages that we are finding ourselves today?
We can't have any liberation on the African continent without women's participation. I mean, it's this quote sometimes people just say, no liberation without the participation of women, but it's critical. I mean, our existence is tied to the woman. Even myself being on this planet is tied to the woman. The education that I receive, who I am as a human being, comes from that. And then beyond the reproductive work, I just share that people think of Patrice Lumumba as this great man. Of course, he's a great man. But a woman wrote his speeches, right? She made sure that the struggle that she saw as she was mobilizing in the villages in the Congo was reflected in the speech that was shared with the world on June 30th, 1960, that we know that we cannot be free if the women are not there. But secondly, it's also important for us to notice that there have been, not just for Andrée Blouin, that the participation of women in the struggle is often an afterthought. It's not at the forefront of the struggle. This is why in DRC, we were intentional in creating a center. There is a cultural center in the Congo called Centre Culturel Andrée Blouin, the Andrée Blouin Cultural Center. And it was done intentionally. Like in our work, we have to be intentional to include women. Why did we make it intentional? We believed that Congolese, we cannot be free without the engagement of women. And two, we also believe that our struggle in the Congo is not a national struggle. So we're not interested in seeing the Congolese flag everywhere. We're interested in knowing that it's an African struggle. So we made sure to have the name of an African woman as the name of the center. So when people ask, who is Andrée Blouin? It's an opportunity to say, she is a Central African woman. I said, why are you choosing someone for Central Africa and not Congolese women? There are many Congolese women you could choose. There is Sophie Kanza, and there are even some who are living today who have contributed a lot, the Mama Bibian Chefu and others who have contributed to the struggle. Why can't you choose the name of the Congolese women? I said, well, did you know that she contributed a lot for independence in Congo? She's the only woman who has been able to mobilize 45,000 Congolese women for a political program. Name me one woman who has done that. And then people are not able to answer. To show that the contribution of women in Congo's independence was so tremendous that even the CIA at Langley, Virginia, they are so afraid of this woman. So we wanted to make sure that in the Congo, people understand the role of women in the liberation of the Congo, concretely, who participated in that, and that it's not a national struggle. It's an African struggle. And someone from Central African Republic also contributed to the liberation of the Congo. So this is what we have to do everywhere as we speak about it. It can't just be this chants in our circles. No, we actually have to live it. Who are the women who are in our struggle, who need to be recognized for their contribution? If we say they don't exist, that's a lie, because if it's hard to find, how are you a human being today? Because the first hero is already your mother, because she kept you in the womb for 9 months. And there's a possibility you won't be here after 9 months, right? So that's already one person in a personal struggle who allowed you to be in existence. So already there is a track record that exists of women who have created these men who are at the forefront of the struggle. A second, start thinking about how are the societies moving. And I speak about the Congo as it's my vantage point most of the time. Congo will not be in existence today if it wasn't for women. We are a country where in some of the estimates, I'll use even the World Bank estimate, they said that we have over 90% unemployment. Sometimes whenever I share it, people say, if you have 90% unemployment, how are people living, right? I mean, Somalia has the same type of numbers, right? So the formal sector in terms of jobs or employment is not really existent. So it's a small minority who have a formal employment. So there is an informal sector. And who is making sure that the economy of the informal sector is advancing? The Congolese women. They are the ones who are making sure that in the agricultural process, we are able to get food. They are the ones in the markets who are selling things that we eat. That if today the women of the Congo decide to do a general strike, the entire country will shut down, right? That's the power that the Congolese women have today. And that's also what has to happen in our movement. The women are there. We need to pay much more attention to what the women are doing in our communities, in our societies, in our organization. We need to lift up their names. And also, we don't need to make it just as a slogan. It has to be concrete. And that's why I use the example of the Centre Culturel Andrée Blouin, which has helped us even in educating people around our circles to know her contribution to the struggle of the Congolese and the African people.
Thank you so much, Comrade Kambale, for that. And it's true that without women participating, given room to participate and contribute to the liberation of our people, we would not see victory against all the conditions and challenges that confront our society, that continue to ravage our society. I'm happy that you also mentioned how the women in the Congo continue to keep alive the informal economy that contributes to the well-being of the Congolese people. That is an important thing that showcases the important role that women play in our society. And to quote the favorite quote by Thomas Sankara, that there is no true revolution without the liberation of women. And truly, there is no true liberation without the liberation of women. Thank you so much, Comrade Kambale. Thank you to everyone who's watching us. And we have a lot of work that we do on our Facebook page. You can find the Facebook page at this handle at Pan Africanism Today. And also you can get us on YouTube at Pan Africanism Today. That's where we store a lot of similar work for those who have missed watching previous sessions of the Feminist Speaks. And there you'll find another huge archive of other important work that we continue doing. We'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.